Welcome to Authors Revealed, and I'm so excited. One of my favorite pieces of fiction. It has a sequel. It's German writer Philipp Sendker's. It's called A Well-Tempered Heart. It's a sequel to The Art of Hearing Heartbeats. Well, Philipp, it is so incredibly wonderful to have you here in Naperville and at Anderson's Bookshop. And I want to tell you that your book, your first book, is one of our absolute favorites to hand sell to readers, and especially to book groups. So now we have a sequel,
Yes.
A Well-Tempered Heart, to this book. So I want to know, what are you hearing from your fans of the first book, The Art of Hearing Heartbeats? I mean, what are you hearing from those people who absolutely adored that book, and how thrilling it is to have a sequel?
That is a crucial question, I tell you, because I was so nervous. First of all, I wasn't nervous at all. I just wrote the book and I didn't think of expectations. I didn't think of all the readers around the world who might care about a sequel. And then it was done. And then I got so anxious, I got so nervous that it was unbearable at home. So my wife said, stop it now, read the book, and if it's the book you wanted to write, we are fine. If it's not, we are in trouble.
Sure.
So I read the book again, and afterwards I was really relaxed because I knew this is the book I wanted to write. It came out in Germany about a year and a half ago.
Okay, right.
And we have a lot of The Art of Hearing Heartbeat fans in Germany. And they loved it. I got a very good response. And most people say it's different, and of course it is.
Yes,
it is a little darker.
Yes, it is
but
darker.
They find it equally emotional, moving, inspirational.
Oh,
and that's
absolutely.
What I want.
There's no question about that. But in Germany, when this book came out, were you worried that, the book, it had that slow growing to become so popular, especially in Germany and then in Europe, because it had a slow start. I think you were hoping for huge things when the first book was first published in Germany, but then it grew to be this absolute favorite. Were you afraid, having the second book, that maybe it wouldn't have the response that the first book had when it came out?
After I had read it, I think I was okay, because I knew this is the book I wanted to write. It's as good as I was capable of doing it, and everything else is not in my hands. This is up to the readers. And as I said, I'm lucky. People love it in Germany. It just came out as a paperback in Germany, and it's on #1 on the bestseller list in Switzerland, and I think on #5 in Germany. So it's really well received.
Well, and well deserved. So this book, it has a wonderful ending. But I don't want to give any spoilers, because we don't want to give anything away about what happens in the second book. But tell us a little bit about the book, and where did that seed to write the sequel? Because this book basically takes place 10 years after Julia comes back from Burma, and she starts this story 10 years in her life that's moved on. So where did the seed come from to start
It's
the
an
sequel?
interesting story, and I have written 4 novels so far, and this is really unique because I never planned to write it. I was in Burma about 3 years ago. I was doing research for another project, and I was daydreaming. I was sitting in Kalor in a tea house. I was looking around, and then I thought, maybe that might be Julia Wynn who was coming down the road, one of the characters from The Art of Hearing Heartbeats. And I thought, what might she be doing now, almost 10 years later? What happened to her after she came back from Burma and had met her half-brother and so on? So that I toyed with that idea for a few days, but then I wanted to push it aside because I was in the middle of another project. But I could not put her aside. I went back to Germany, and this idea stayed with me for weeks. And then eventually I said, okay, now I have to give in now. I just start writing. Maybe this is a short story, maybe this is just an exercise. And I started writing. And after 50, 60 pages, I knew this is serious. I should rather put the other project on hold. And it was like, there was a story in me which wanted to be told, which needed to be told. And I just wrote it down. I didn't have a master plan. I didn't even know the ending. When I started the last chapter, and Julia has to make an important decision in the last chapter, I did not know what she would do.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I just wrote, and that's part true for the whole book. I just wrote it down. It was like it was coming out of me.
You don't outline, so basically you wrote, and I think that's so fascinating when I ask so many authors, you know, whether they outline or they know where the book is going, but I think it's so much more wonderful when you don't know where it's taking you, just like we don't know where the book is going.
Yeah,
And,
I think it would be boring if I knew the
Right,
ending. If I knew
sure,
everything,
right.
what's the point of writing it down? For me, it's writing is like a journey I take myself onto, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this book without the spoilers. Like you say, there is that decision that Julia, the main character, has to make towards the end of the story. But tell us a little bit about the book, that she's gone back. You know, she's wondering, you know, what is going on with her life. Something is majorly missing, and she's hearing a voice that's telling her something. So tell us a little bit about the story.
I think the first book, of course, Julia was looking for her father,
Right.
and in the second book, she's looking for herself. It's set 10 years later, and she is a very successful lawyer in Manhattan, but she doesn't have a partner, she doesn't have kids, and something is missing in her life. She has a lot of recognition, she is wealthy, but she's not really happy, and she's almost like as she's having a burnout syndrome. And then she starts to hear this voice. And I know that some readers, they wonder, they don't like this voice idea so much. For me, it was rather natural because I hear a voice.
I hear voices too, just so I don't answer them is the key. You know?
And usually the voice I hear is my
Right.
voice. So
Yeah.
I argue with
Right.
myself,
Sure.
I talk about my book and so on. So for me, this was quite natural.
Oh,
I
I think it totally was.
Yeah,
I think
good,
you
I'm
always have
glad.
that voice that's telling you something that maybe
See?
you should be doing or questioning
Absolutely.
what you're doing.
That's
Yeah.
what I meant.
Right.
And so that's with her. She has this voice which
Yeah.
starts asking all these questions she has been trying to avoid. You know, what do you want in life? Are you really happy? Why don't you have kids? And this becomes such an obsession that for several reasons she decides to go back to Burma to solve this crisis.
Right. This whole thing about Burma or Myanmar or Myanmar, you know, talking about this whole setting for these books. Both of these books have that country is basically a character in both of these books. Tell us a little bit about the setting for these, and what does this country do for you for that fodder for great story?
I think it touched me in a way no country ever touched me. And the first time I went there was in '95, and it was just a place totally removed from everything else I had known. A country which had been closed basically in '95. You only could go there for a week. I mean, in '95 I got a visa for 4 weeks, but from 1960 to 1990, for more than 30 years, you only got a visa for 7 days. It was really kind of a closed country, and it was totally removed from our commercial lifestyle. I went there and I mean, I remember on the first day I asked my driver, because I felt so lost in the capital, is there a McDonald's in town? And he turned around and asked me, McDonald's, is the guy Scottish? I mean, he had no clue. So they were really...
the Western world had not
No.
had made its mark at all.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And life is hard in Burma, has been.
Sure.
It's a very poor country. It's governed by a very corrupt and brutal dictatorship. Now it's opening up, but at that point it was.
Sure.
But still, I never talked to somebody who pitied him or herself. They were very humble, the people, and I had the feeling content in a certain way. It was just beautiful, and I had so many talks with people. They moved me beyond words, because they were very spiritual at the same time, and they had a very different way of looking at life. So I had to go back. I was seduced.
Sure. No. And revisited it in the second book, though.
Yeah.
And I know you've been back many times since you were there in the '90s. So, but I just find it so fascinating. What a beautiful setting for this book. Because in some ways, it could not have been set anyplace else after you read the stories. You know,
Absolutely.
it just makes it so perfect. So Julia, your main character, it's so interesting. You know, you're German, but then she's an American citizen. But you spent some time here in the United States as a correspondent. So tell us a little about Julia. Is she based on any women in your life or anybody you know? Or is she totally your imagination?
No, she's my imagination.
Okay.
There's in all these, on both books, there's actually one person I think who's based on 2 or 3 characters, friends I have in Burma. That's Uba, her half-brother.
Oh, right.
He is really inspired especially by 3 people, good friends of mine in Burma. I find so intriguing.
Yeah, his character is just incredible. I love him. He's fantastic. You know, a little bit about the research, and I know you had to research some of the history, and I'm sure as a correspondent covering this part of Asia, you had to do a lot of that anyway. But going back to this, because the first book, basically it's the 1950s all the way to the present, and this book too, but going back and talking about the children who were forced to be soldiers in Burma. Did you do a lot of research to add that to that part of this book and its story?
Actually, yes, but it was the other way around. When I was correspondent, I went there in 95, then 96, 97, and in 96, a good friend of mine introduced me to three young men, and they told me their stories. And it's the stories you read in the book, that the military surrounds villages, and they take all young men between 14 and 22, and they use them as porters or as landmine sweepers, and lots of them get killed. And they told me, I mean, incredibly brutal stories, how they were tortured and many of them died. So I wanted to write a story about them. I went back to Hong Kong and I wrote the story, but Stern wasn't interested. And I was so upset because I had put these people at risk. If they had caught us, they would have killed them. They would have expelled me, but they would have executed these three young kids. So I put them at risk because I thought the world has to know about it. I wrote the story and Stern wasn't interested. So now I had the story and the notes, and I had to put them in my little archive. And when I wrote my book, eventually I thought, this is going to be part of it. And I took my notes, and they were almost 20 years old, 15 years old. But these chapters in the book, they're all based on the interview I conducted in 96.
Do you know what happened to those young men?
Oh yeah, they survived. They're doing, I hope they are still alive, but they became, I met them years later, and they were fathers and farmers. So.
So that research must have, I mean, it's so interesting that you could pull that out and use it again.
And what an interesting twist.
Oh my gosh.
That now, 20 years later, people around the world can read about it.
Right. So Julia's half-brother, when she goes back to Burma and Uba, he's such a wonderful thing, and also to the half-sister. Is it Nunu? Is that how you pronounce it? Or
Nunu.
Yeah, Nunu. Fabulous characters, and also to just wondering about their spirit. That's the thing I think is so fabulous about both of these books that you've written, is that you not only know these characters, you know, from the way they think and the way they behave, but you know them from the inside out, which I think is so wonderful, and I think that's where the heart of this all comes in. But were these characters based on any particular people? But then just wondering their spirit, how did you get these characters completely out of your imagination? Or do you think they were an amalgamation of so much of what you found in Burma as a whole?
I think both. Because I've been there so many times, I've talked to so many people, and I think there's a third one. Maybe they are not that different after all. And that's something I learned from the people in Burma, that you sit in a hut with a farmer and you talk and everything is different. I mean, the way he lives, and some maybe doesn't even know that a telephone exists. He has no clue what Hong Kong or New York is. And you sit there and you think you don't have much in common. But then you talk, and maybe you talk to his wife, and the wife says, oh, our child is so sick, and she is afraid that the child might die. And you get closer and closer, and you spend a day, and then you get deeper and deeper, and you realize, actually, there is not that much. You are not far apart. We are, in the end, we are all soulmates, right? If it comes to the important things in life, or our human condition, what's really important to us, I mean, we are not that different. So I write about them, but I partly write about ourselves or myself. You know, this woman who has decided between her son. I mean, that it tortures her, but it would torture every woman, whether she's Burmese or American or German or Israeli or Russian, whatsoever. So, and I think that's probably the reason why these books are so widely read, not just in America or Germany, but in 30 countries, because I think I write about some universal themes.
And I think, well, those themes, love is a big one. And also too, but it's also getting to know people, because you can know them, not only their minds, but their hearts and their spirits is so important. But I think this book especially has that theme of forgiveness, and that's a universal theme too.
Absolutely.
But it really does have that beautiful message of forgiveness.
And this is interesting. Again, I didn't plan it. When I read it, after my wife told me to read it again, I realized this is the central theme, forgiveness. And I thought this is not a coincidence that it is, because in Burma I've met so many people who had been treated poorly, who had been tortured, who had lost so much. but I didn't really encounter much hatred or anger or calling for revenge. And let me tell you one little story which really moved me, made me think about a friend. He's a friend now. He's in his 40s, but he was arrested as a student when he was 20 because I think he participated in a sit-in or something totally ridiculous. They arrested him. They put him in jail far from the capital, so nobody would visit him. The only person who came was his mom. They were very close. But then she stopped coming. And only years later he learned she had been killed in a car accident. He was with 7 other inmates in a cell 8 by 8. 2 guys went mad. One killed himself. And it was, I mean, for 8 years, for nothing. And then he was released. And he fled the country, and now he's back. And he told me his story, and I said, you must be so full of hatred and anger. They stole 8 years of your life. He said, no, not at all. First of all, I think I learned in that prison more than I would have learned outside. He said, yes, but you paid a high price. He said, yes, that's true. But I forgave those people. Why? And he said, because I realized if I don't forgive, I would still be a prisoner. Only by forgiving can I set myself free. And the thing is, I found that very empowering because it's up to us if we forgive or not. It's up to us to set ourselves free.
Right. Wow. And that's a rare person though too. But what a great lesson we can all take from that. Yeah. But Buddhism, you know, is a role, you know,
Absolutely.
in both of these books. And looking at that, what did you learn about Buddhism, and how does it play any part in your life, you know, today?
I mean, I think it's easier for Buddhists to forgive, I suppose. And the most important lesson, and I try to write it about it in both books, that we are our own masters. It's up to us. And whatever we do and whatever we don't do has consequences, and we are responsible. Don't blame others. Don't blame yourself, and look at yourself and see what you can do differently. You can change other people, you can only change yourself. And that's difficult enough.
Oh, that's very true, very true. But we can be so frustrated and hung up on thinking we can make other people change who they are and how they do things.
I think that's what Buddha taught me. And I'm not a Buddhist because I don't believe in reincarnation. I wish I did. I think it would make life easier,
right? Yes,
but I don't.
Sure.
But there are many important lessons I learned, and this is probably the most important here.
Right. You know, as a correspondent and being a journalist and reporting on different stories, you know, whether you were in the United States or in Asia, and then moving from writing nonfiction to, you know, pieces like that, but moving to fiction. Was that a hard transition for you, moving from that sort of writing to the fiction?
Actually, no, because I've always wanted to be a novelist. It was my childhood dream, even as a 13-year-old boy. I remember I wrote an essay in school. My mom showed it to me a while ago about what we would like to do when we are grown-ups. And I wrote, I would like to be a novelist. And so that has always been my dream. It took a long detour, but when I started, after a few weeks, I knew this is what I would like to do for the rest of my life. The biggest change was the loneliness. When you, as a journalist, you travel a lot, and then you write your piece, and you have another assignment, and you keep going. It takes me 2 years to write a novel, and within these 2 years, I do a lot of research, but when I start writing, I'm there with me and my characters, and this is, but I got used to this loneliness.
Yeah, it's more a solitary type of thing than being a journalist. So what do you think, though, being a journalist and doing that, what aspects of that profession did you bring to your fiction writing?
I have to do a lot of research to be authentic. So I learned that as a journalist, that's very important.
You know, and making sure that those facts...
The facts are one thing, and another one, as a journalist, I think you learn to observe. You soak everything up, and you see around, you look around, and people, my readers, tell me that my books, they bring places alive, and I think that's because as a journalist I learned how to describe and how to soak things up, and how to watch people and places.
You know, I've always found, and I think journalists make very good fiction writers, and I think one of the reasons why is that you can have all the facts or the history or of a place or a person, but when you use fiction, you can fill in the emotional gaps. It brings it it's that much more vivid and that much more alive, and I think I'm sure you find it that way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've published some nonfiction, a book about China, Cracks in the Great Wall.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
right. That was the first book I wrote because I covered China as a correspondent, and when you work for a magazine, you do research, and then you can only write like a few pages, and I still had so many notes and so much I wanted to tell. So I decided to write one nonfiction book. That was the first one. Then The Art of Hearing Heartbeats.
Right.
And then I wrote 2 novels set in China. And that will be a China trilogy. There will be a third one. And the 2 books have been published in Germany and some other countries, and I hope they will be published in America soon.
Here.
Yes, very soon. The first one was translated, and now we are looking for a publisher.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. So writing, The Well-Tempered Heart, and knowing that now we're 10 years later in Julia's life, did you really have to sit down and think about what had transpired in that 10 years for her before you sat down and start writing this book?
No, it became alive while I wrote it. It was not like that I thought about it, but sometimes it was really like Julia was telling me her life, what happened.
Right.
Sounds mysterious, but
no, it
that's
does.
how
No,
it
but
was.
it makes sense, and I love the way you just sat down and it just flowed like that. I think that's really brilliant.
I mean, it means I still have to edit, and I write, and then I work very hard at it.
Yeah,
but the first impulse is like I just write.
As a German writer and being German yourself, do you see a difference in readers when they come to your books? Whether they're a German reader or someone else in Europe, or readers here in the United States, or do you think because of the universal truth of your stories, we're all the same when we come to your books and read them?
I think we are all the same. There's one difference I noticed. I'm also very popular in Italy, and I've done some readings in Italy, and there are lots of men in my readings when I go to Italy. That's some maybe the cliche, the stereotype is true that Italian men are very romantic. Whatever. But that's I notice it every time I'm in Italy. I think, wow, there are lots of men here.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So the books they're translated. I mean, your English is absolutely phenomenal, but you didn't do the translations yourself.
I couldn't. No, I have too much respect for language,
Okay.
and I was told that you can only translate into your native language, unless you do, I don't know, manuals or phone books. You probably can do.
And that would be so interesting reading, wouldn't it?
but literature you have to do into your native language.
Yeah. Are you pleased with the translations?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I tell you a funny little story. I was looking for a translator for a long time for The Art of Hearing Heartbeats. Nobody wanted to take it on because nobody believed in it. So eventually this young man did it, a student. He did a sample translation of 30 pages so that I knew if he was capable of doing it.
Right.
And I read the translation, the first 30 pages, and seriously, I looked up the original because I could not believe that I can write that well. Wow, this is really great. It sounds fantastic in English. It's really me who wrote that. Wow, it's not that bad after all.
So you're reading the English and thinking, wow, this is really
This is really good. Did I write that?
That's so interesting, because German words are so very different than English words, because one German word can basically explain a whole sentence or a paragraph in just one German word. There's differences in the language.
No, he did a fantastic job.
Oh, that's so great. So they're published by the U.S. here by Other Press, and I think they publish some fantastic pieces of nonfiction and fiction. And their publisher is Judith, and I've met her, and she has just an incredible amounts of energy, but she is so passionate about the books that she publishes. So you must be really pleased with working with her for your U.S.
I'm so happy. I think that's what really I love most about her, is the passion for books and her energy. And they did a fantastic job. I mean, in terms of marketing and the way they introduced the book to the American audience. They worked with the independent booksellers. And I tell you, when the book came out, Judith said, we are a small house. Usually we sell about 5,000-6,000 copies. And if we sell 5,000 copies of your book, I'm pleased, I'm happy. And now this is really thanks to you and thanks to the many, many readers, just by word of mouth. I mean, I didn't appear in a morning show on ABC or whatever. There were no big reviews in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. No, just by word of mouth and hand-sold by booksellers. I think we are close to 250,000 now.
That's fantastic.
After 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't it an amazing number?
Well, it's
and
not
this is
hard
thanks
to
to you,
believe.
Becky, and all your readers.
Well, but that's also this. I think when we love a book, we can't help but yell about it to everybody.
But isn't it nice? You can still make a difference. Everybody
Right,
talks
right.
about the big internet companies,
Right,
whatever.
right.
But independent booksellers and readers, book clubs, they can, even now, they can make the difference.
They can. And I think when it's that point of being loudmouth about something that we like, and we have to tell people about it. And I think it's that sharing face to face and talking to people about books is what really can put a book on the map.
So keep spreading the word.
We will, although this is easy. Your books, you make it too easy for us. So the covers, I noticed, and I saw some of the German covers, for, the Der
Herzenstimme.
Yeah. So the cover's very different. How do you like your American covers compared to what you have?
I love the two American covers.
Yeah.
I mean, the Out of Ring Heartbeats, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I like this one very much as well.
Yeah. They're beautiful. They're really beautiful, and they're just beautiful paperbacks, the way they're put. These books to me, and I think as a journalist, and I know you probably really think about it, they really are stories of journeys about, whether it's taking your body, but it's also your mind and your spirit and everything. Where are these books taking you? Because obviously they've really taken you on a journey.
That's true. I mean, life is a journey, right?
Yeah,
And they are. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I travel with the characters, and I evolve as a writer, I think, and they teach me a lot. Absolutely, this forgiveness. I thought a lot about forgiveness since I finished the book. How important it is. What makes it so difficult sometimes to forgive. That has become a central theme, actually, in my life.
So what do you hope readers will have taken well from the first book, but also now the new book, The Well-Tempered Heart?
That's a good question, but difficult to answer. Because for me, there are basically two kinds of books, good ones and bad ones. The good ones move and entertain me, and the bad ones bore me. So I try to write moving and entertaining books. But what you take out of it, it's up to you. And you will take something different than your friend or whoever. So basically, it's not one book I write. I write many, many books. My central theme is forgiving, but somebody else might find something else in it. So that's not up to me.
Okay. All right. So, what are you working on now? And I did hear that maybe there's going to be more about Julia that's coming.
Yes, I have a couple of projects.
Okay.
First, very exciting is the Out of Ring Heartbeats will turn into a movie.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
And I do it with a European company.
Sure, right.
Since it's been so successful in America, I got a couple of offers from big studios, from big houses. But it was, then you might get money, but you're not really involved.
Sure,
And I thought, no, this is so close to my heart and so close to me. I want to stay involved. So I went for a smaller company from Austria, and I know these people, they are wonderful. They've been doing some international co-productions. I wrote the movie script myself.
I was going to ask that.
No, and I'm so happy I did that because I had to change things.
Sure.
And I think if somebody else had made these changes, I would have kicked him or her out of the door. And how dare you to touch my book?
Right,
but I did it myself, and it was okay. And I think it's good. And now we are talking to directors and getting the money. And then we hope to shoot it in color, original setting, and it will be in English, of course, international co-production. So that's exciting.
Wonderful.
That was my project last year. And right now I'm writing the third part of the China trilogy.
Okay.
And then, of course, there will be a third book
Well, we
now
have to get that
about
China.
Julia.
Yeah, okay, great. So the third book about Julia, can you give us a little bit of what may?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay, all right. We'll have to wait. But what was screen, writing? Writing the screenplay, was that very different from the book? Was it a different way of taking the book apart and thinking what you had
Yes,
to do?
I had to think about images. How
Right.
can I bring thoughts alive? How can I turn those things into images? This inner dialogue of Tin Win or Mimi, how can I bring it alive in terms of images? And that was, and to make it a little shorter, it's too long for a movie, and make it not simpler, but maybe go straight to the story a little faster. So there is this character in the book, Su Chi, where he grows up with, and then we decide, do we really need Suchi, or can he go straight to the monastery, for instance?
Right, sure.
So we decided to cut her out.
Yeah.
And now he goes straight to the monastery, which is interesting because he has a much closer relationship with the monk, the head monk.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's working out
okay.
well.
Well, thank you so much, and I can't tell you what a pleasure it is to have you come and sit with me and talk about the new book, A Well-Tempered Heart. So congratulations.
Becky, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
That was
can't
really
wait
a pleasure.
for the movie too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
What a fantastic discussion and interview with one of my favorite authors. You have to read these books. They will move you in ways you've never been moved before. It's the sequel to The Art of Hearing Heartbeats. It's A Well-Tempered Heart by Philipp Sendker. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.